Today, there is no shortage of brains here. There is no shortage of resources here, and surely there is no shortage of vision. And this gives me very big hope that a lot can be achieved with the support that we have and the vision that we have from the leadership.
Welcome to Flavors of Ambition. I'm so glad you could join me, Ramia Faraj, for another absorbing conversation. Today, we're excited to be joined by two exceptional leaders at the forefront of technology and innovation. First, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Najwa Aaraj, CEO of the Technology Innovation Institute in the UAE. Dr. Aaraj is a leading expert in applied cryptography and cybersecurity with a background spanning global firms and cutting-edge research. Under her leadership, TII is driving transformative technology outcomes across autonomous systems, AI, and secure platforms. Welcome, Najwa.
Thank you for having me.
And joining us also is Faisal Hamady, Managing Director and Partner at BCG. Faisal specializes in business transformation and economic development, working closely with clients to unlock value and drive long-term growth. He brings deep expertise in guiding companies through complex challenges, making him the perfect guest to help us explore today's topics, the convergence of technology and economic growth. Hello, Faisal.
Thank you for having me.
It's wonderful to be joined by both of you today. Najwa, I would love to hear more about what really inspired you to specialize in the fields of cryptography and autonomous robotics.
Thank you for having me, Ramya. My area of expertise is actually cryptography and secure embedded security. Autonomous and robotics is a new area for me that I'm very passionate about, and I started doing as I joined the Technology Innovation Institute. Me joining cryptography and secure system was a bit incidental. I've always, been super passionate about mathematics and engineering. And after I finished my bachelor degree, I wanted to join a PhD degree in the field. And when I applied and I went for VLSI and CAD design. And this was in 2004. And this was when the elections were happening in the US. They were deploying at that point the e-voting with the Diebold machine. And there was a team in Princeton that broke the Diebold machine, and they were able to retrieve cryptographic keys. And this is when the area actually attracted my attention. I saw the future in it. I had a conversation with the professor, and this was it. I started reading, I started doing coursework in information theory, cryptography, etc., and then decided to join it, and this was it. And then I entered the field.
So it was the right decision to move abroad for your master's and your doctorate. Tell us a little bit about how you decided to do so and what you took from that experience.
For me, moving abroad was not a hard decision to make. In fact, I wanted to move abroad earlier to go do my bachelor degree abroad, but it was a no for my parents. And this is when I did the bet that, okay, I'll stay here for my bachelor degree as a 16 years old. As soon as I'm done, I'm going to go do my master's and my PhD degree outside. So it was not really a hard decision. It was hard on them. It was not hard on me. Emotionally, it was. But as you know, an ambitious young person, I saw my future to go there, do my master's, my PhD in the US.
And share with us the most pivotal lessons that you learned during your time abroad, and what did you bring back to the UAE?
Look, I think there were many lessons that you learn as a young individual, student, professional when you go abroad. First, you get exposed to things that you're not exposed to in a more, I would say, conservative, protective culture, right? So there's a lot of lessons that you learn from a personal side, how to be resistant, how to be thick-skinned, how to be more independent and depend on yourself. And you start believing in yourself more, in the sense that, you know, as families in the Middle East, we're more conservative. We always rely on our entourage, and sometimes you give up because you know somebody else can do it. When you're by your own and you have to do it yourself, you start believing in yourself more. I think my self-confidence and my belief in myself really grew exponentially when I went abroad. And I'm very thankful for this experience. As painful as it was, I think this shaped me. This shaped me as a person much more than the 16, 17 years experience or even more that I had back home. So I gathered this experience somehow and I brought it here. And I do believe it helped me a lot with a career at the intersection of deep research, deep tech, whether in cryptography, security, robotics later on, and also assuming a management role in these areas.
You talk a lot about the limiting factor of family and the cultural rules that we live by in this region oftentimes, although now we are breaking these rules increasingly. So leadership often has these very personal roots. How has your family and your upbringing really influenced your approach to leading and to driving innovation?
Look, I grew in, especially my early days, were during a war, right? So as much as it is painful time, it also shapes you as a person, right? You see how resilient can impact how you can survive hard circumstances and hardship. And this was very important. You see how humble you have to be, because at war humbles you somehow, right? Because at some point, nothing is in your control. However, when you get out of it, it also gives you a very good perspective and positivity in life. And most importantly, it also gives you the perspective that you really have to be strong and resilient in life. Now, besides that, which is the negative part, I personally grew in a wonderful family. Everybody in my family had a scientific, mathematics, finance background. My mom, she was a professional in finance. And my dad, he's an engineer, mathematics. He's a super nerd, right? Mm-hmm. And this is what shaped me to love science, to love engineering. And I must say they were very tough in the sense that, educationally speaking, I remember that if I used to get a grade of 19.5 over 20 over math, which is fantastic, I would be scared to go back home because I know they will be looking or where the half was missing, right?
We're being too easy on our kids now.
Yeah, but the point is, and what's funny is they are very hard on you until you're 16, and then you become hard on yourself and they wonder why. This is something that I always remind them of, right? And I think Faisal probably relates to this too.
I can definitely relate.
Yeah. So all of this shapes you somehow. All of this shapes you on how you should approach life, how you should approach your career, how you should approach your personal life, and to give you a better perspective on how to handle the future and yet go strong even if the future is not very, let's say, predictable.
As you both know, hospitality is a celebrated element of business in this region. Faisal, would you say it's a key ingredient for both successful business and personal relationships?
I would definitely say so. I think the saying that goes that business moves at the pace of trust is very true in this region specifically. The fact that you do business with other people rather than with other businesses only, so you're making the connection, you're creating that personal connection to things of common interest, and hospitality brings that to the table, right? So the expectation is that you're connecting with other people, you're connecting with your clients, you're going beyond first discussing business, but first spending the first, 5 to 10 minutes of any meeting just on greetings, asking about family, about connections. And the second aspect is that in this region particularly, there's a lot of businesses that are, call them family businesses, right? So quite a bit of that is connected to personal connections and the way they're creating those personal connections beyond only what businesses are creating.
And Najwa, would you agree with that? Is hospitality essential to business in this region?
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may add, I think there are two things that also hospitality correlates to in this region. The first one is trust. It inspires trust, as Faisal said. And also it's, once you start having these connections, you also feel that there is no fakeness in the relationships, right? And this is something that is not necessarily true when you do business outside. And something that's very important, especially for me as a woman in technology and business here in the UAE particular, I don't have an experience working with the wider region like Faisal does. But in the UAE is that people are very respectful. And this is very, very, very important, especially for me as you're doing this business. So if you have trust, you have respect, and there is a genuine relationship with the clients, this actually incentivizes you to do your job and to do your job more in order to reach a common goal with your clients.
Absolutely. And this podcast is Flavors of Ambition. So I need to ask both of you what your favorite dish is and if it evokes any special memories for you. Faisal.
I would say in the spirit of this topic of innovation and also on the Middle Eastern component, I would say one of my favorite dishes is a meza platter. And the reason I like this is it's a combination of diverse dishes that are simple yet very bold in flavors. And I think the experience that you usually share over a meza platter is that there's a number of people having conversations, trying different things and mixing and matching. That also brings also the spirit of what we spoke about of creating the personal connections, and also that diversity of ideas, richness of conversations that I really like in that setup.
It's a very special connection you've made there. Najwa.
I don't think if I can make the special connection between food and business and technology the same. But for me, I must say it would be kibbeh. Let me just also put it a bit into perspective, like Faisal did. It's a dish that first it has few components, but depending on the quantities that you put of each, the taste would be different, and it's always good for some reason. And you have different variety of how people make it, different shapes of how the chef makes it usually, but the base is the same. And also, I take this as a guiding rule. As long as you have a strong base and a good base, I think no matter what you do, will be good at the end of the day.
Faisal, the Middle East is known for blending modernity with tradition, as you know. What cultural aspects of this region really support innovation and research and development?
Look, every time we speak about innovation, we're speaking about fluid mobility of ideas, talent, and capital, right? Like that's the main premise of innovation that we speak about. And I think if I take a little bit of a small historical lesson on the Middle East, the Silk Road has not only been a trade route in the Middle East, it has been exactly that. It has been this corridor of creating mobility of ideas and talent and capital, and that infused a lot of the historical cultural aspect. And we have seen a number of scientists, historically speaking, whether it's Al-Khwarizmi on the cryptography side, whether it's Al-Jazari, Ibn Sina, Ibn Hayyan, there's a number of them that made significant strides on optics, automation, robotics, cryptography, mathematics, and a number of others. And I think that culture and that exchange of ideas, that fluidity in the ecosystem is something significant to the Middle East that is embedded in the culture, and I believe it continues to strive. Now, over a period of time, I think the Middle East has been focusing mainly from an economic perspective on a number of industries such as oil and gas and industries and so on that has a little bit more rigidity to it, and that created a stable system over a number of years that allowed for this progress that we're seeing today. I think the region generally is reinventing itself during that era and creating what was back in the golden age, that more fluidity in the ecosystem, more experimentation, more bold vision and risk-taking to bring back that innovation.
Indeed, as you said, there is recently a lot of movement, a lot of initiatives, a lot of collaborations, and big amounts of investments in R&D in the region overall. And allow me to focus on what is happening in the UAE. You said something that the region is reinventing itself, and I would say today to me, I look into the UAE and I have very big hopes that the country here, the region overall, will be able to re-instantiate the R&D and innovation coming from here, like, hundreds of years ago, as you mentioned. If I talk about what's happening in the UAE and specifically what happened in the Advanced Technology Research Council, which, for us as an organization, we're not very old. We're only 5 years old, in fact. This was a conscious decision was to form a council for research under which 3 organizations are established. One of them is the Technology Innovation Institute, and it is an arm that does applied R&D, right? There were technologies that have been identified that we wanted to work on and also to compete at a global scale. And what is very important when this initiative started, this is an initiative that started with a complete conviction from the top. And this is what's very special about the UAE itself, is the support that you get from the leaders, the vision of leaders on top that are very smart, very well informed, and they believe in the power of technology. They believe in the power of technology in this economic diversification, and also the power that the UAE and the region that can play at a global scale, right? Today, there is no shortage of brains here. There is no shortage of resources here, and surely there is no shortage of vision.
I like that a lot, and I think it comes back to what you asked earlier, right? So it's when you mentioned the bold ambition from the top, I think that's also one of the distinctive factors that you see in the region. There is a strong political capital and strong political will that's looking to invest in R&D and in innovation in general, and that's not primarily for the sake of investing. It's tackling the existential challenges that we see in the region. There's a number of them, whether it's on sustainability, whether it's on water, whether it's on healthcare. There's unique challenges that the region faces. And I think R&D and innovation are one of the core components to be able to bridge that gap. And equally to that, when you look into, you mentioned competitiveness and diversification. This is a core component of how do you bring this economy that has been stable over the past number of years, and as that transformation is happening, you use R&D and innovation as a catalyst for new industries such as quantum and AI and robotics that are creating this new economy in the future.
Najwa, you are actually delving into a broad spectrum of technologies at TII. In your role as CEO, what technologies are you focusing on the most?
See, today the scope of TII is across 9 technological domains. And under each technological domain, you have specific areas, or you have sub-areas or sub-domains that we go through. Of course, as my role, as my CEO role, I need to have a good overview of all these technological domains, going into depth with them, etc. However, I don't claim to be able to even understand everything to a specific, let's say, depth, detailed depth. Now, what I'm very comfortable with from a depth perspective, let's say, even though as a CEO you cannot go deep into many things, you start being a bit more high level. It's cryptography, which is what I studied, which is what I've done as a profession for more than 20 years. Robotics, given that I was quite involved with the center. As I mentioned with AI, even though I'm not an expert, I would like to stay close, both from a TII focus, because this is one of the main focuses that we have in TII, but also from a professional and personal interest. Quantum is a fascinating area that we have also a super strong team, and quantum, I mean, we have a super strong team across, but quantum is an area where I think is the future as well. So I try to get closer to the detail, and I try to be closer to the detail of all the other areas. We have a team that's working on directed energy technologies, and this team is also doing fascinating things, right?
And when do you expect we'll see the first quantum computer? We're seeing the tech giants coming out with quantum chips over the past 6 months.
So there are, let's say, there are 3 technological bets on quantum today on how are we hoping to achieve this large-scale fault-tolerant computer. And this is the point where you have this large-scale fault-tolerant computer where you say, I have a useful quantum computer that can do something, that can break crypto, that can solve problems from a complexity class that cannot be solved by classical computers or cannot be solved by AI running on classical computers, so on and so forth. So then, assuming that the quantum computer happens, and I guess the discussion is between 8 to 10 years, maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less, who knows? But there is a lot of progress that is being made. The second question becomes, okay, how does it impact us? Today, as a security professional, the impact on cryptography and security is clear. There is the Shor algorithm that is one of the first quantum algorithms out that threatens public key cryptography. And this is where the whole area of post-quantum crypto that we're working on, and we have an amazing team working on that and contributing globally to candidates, and have done amazing results so far. And then the second point is, great, you have this quantum computer, so what? You protect your crypto. And this is where you have the whole area of quantum algorithms. We need quantum algorithms to be able to do something to actually leverage this hardware, this very powerful hardware that is there. And again, this is another area in TII we're working. We have a team that's in our quantum center that's working on quantum-inspired and quantum-enhanced algorithms for the specific reason to have algorithms ready so that from now and once the quantum computer is available to be able to do something, whether it's in healthcare and drug discovery and advanced material discovery and development and other areas where there will be benefit.
Najwa, your research in cryptography is particularly relevant in today's connected, autonomous world. Why is this area of research so crucial right now?
So this area of research is crucial right now for many reasons. Cryptography, to explain what we do today and what cryptography in general is. It has multiple, let's say, subdomains. One is the development of those algorithms that you use in order to encrypt information, so that if I'm talking, me and you are talking with each other, we have the keys and we have the algorithms, so that if I send you something Faisal doesn't understand or cannot see it or cannot break it, right? So cannot brute force it or cannot use any other cryptanalysis technique to break it. So I think this is when you say cryptography, this is what people understand, which is the core of it. But then there is the plus. Under cryptography, you also have all the privacy-preserving technologies. And privacy is becoming super important with AI and with the exponential growth of AI. And this is where we start talking about fully homomorphic encryption, which is, can I keep my data encrypted and process it using AI or other processing algorithms? And multi-party computation, which has to do with splitting your data in a cryptographic manner across multiple parties so that no one has the upper hand on the data and nobody can see it except the legitimate one. Then you have the other area of post-quantum cryptography, which is today super, super crucial, and the UAE is one of the pioneering countries in that. There are rules and regulations and laws that were issued between 2023 and end of 2024 to start this migration, and this is really trying to find, and it's a global effort, algorithms that will be resistant to the quantum attacks once this large-scale fault-tolerant computer that I spoke about is ready. You have the blockchain as well, which is a cryptography. I mean, as much as we love cryptocurrencies, blockchain at the core of it is cryptography, is cryptographic protocols. This is another area of cryptography. You also have cryptanalysis, you have protocols, etc., etc. So spanning all the areas, there is a criticality of this technology and for another technological domain that we have. When you talk about libraries, this is the core of secure communications. This is the core of secure communications and smart cities, between sensors, between IoT devices. It will be very, very critical for autonomous systems, especially as we start adopting autonomous systems for urban applications, for cargo transportations, for day-to-day ground transportation, for marine transportation, and what have you, for data storage and other use cases. Post-quantum cryptography is very critical because if we're saying that quantum computers will be ready in 8 to 10 years, and organizations store data for more than 20, 30 years. Critical organizations do that. So by the time this quantum computer, if I store something now, the quantum computer will be ready in 10 years. It will break what I stored now. So I should, from now, look into how can I make it resistant to this attack that is coming in 10 years. And this is what we call the store now, decrypt later threat. Privacy-preserving technologies, in my view, will be super, super critical as we deploy AI more.
I'd also add that very important point that what Dr. Najwa is speaking about is the regulators and the policymakers of today do not have the capacity and capability to deal with the ramifications of those technologies. You spoke about AI agents at scale. Imagine we're having millions of AI agents deployed to use government services, that use citizen services, but also confidential data. You need those specific technologies to be able to govern that data, to manage that, to govern the way the agents are being used, what they are using, and so on and so forth, because the traditional systems of institutions with policymakers trying to deal with this as a human capacity is obsolete for now.
Faisal, I want to ask you to give us a sense of the impact and scale that the world will see thanks to the convergence of AI, machine learning, robotics, and so many other emerging technologies. How revolutionary will it be for us?
Exactly as you said, we're seeing a convergence of these technologies, and that's creating, in economic terms, a parallel economy. Call it, for instance, the digital economy or the technological economy. That's parallel to what we're seeing in the exchange of goods and services in the physical world, right? A lot of the value is shared, created, moved in the completely virtual economy that we say, or the digital economy. To give you a sense, today the digital economy represents roughly 15% of the global GDP. That's roughly $15 trillion. And that's expecting in the next couple of years, 5 years or so, to be 25 to 30% of the global GDP. That's $1 in the digital economy for every $2 that are spent in the classic economy. So that's going to be big. Now the issue is, or the concern is that there's a lot of concentration of value. So when you look into, for example, the number of patents, whether they're in directed energy, quantum, cryptography, AI, and a number of others, they're relatively concentrated in 5 nations. US and China plus 2-3 others hold 80% of the patents globally. Same thing when you look into the startup scene, the unicorns are concentrated in 4 to 5 countries, and so on and so forth. So there's a big opportunity, but there's a concentration of value, whether it's at a national level or at a corporate level. You've seen the Googles, the Amazons, the Microsofts of the US, or you've seen some of the players in China that also hold that concentration, and we're getting to create a different concentration of value, or the winner takes all or winner takes most dynamic in that digital economy. I think what's interesting to say is there is a closing window of opportunity, right? The pace of how things are evolving is multiplying by the hour. From adoption of technology, from the curves of how technology is being adopted. You've seen things like ChatGPT, for example, hitting millions of users in seconds or in a few minutes. We've also seen, for example, a number of unicorns, which are billion-dollar companies. Out of the world's 1,500 unicorns, 1,000 of them were created over the past 3 years. So the pace is getting much and much faster, and that concentration of value is creating that convergence of technology that we say, if you need to act on it, and you need to act now.
It's actually very interesting, and I like your answer. Today, if you see, some technologies are growing at an exponential rate, or they're expected to grow at an exponential rate. Whether you're talking about AI, whether you're talking about security, whether you're talking about quantum, whether you're talking about laser technologies, etc. For those technologies to pick up, they're also dependent on others, right? And the other ones, if you look today, some of them are approaching the S-curve. And this is where you need to see whether they're going to keep up to meet the demands. For example, AI and the semiconductor industry. This industry, how is it going to keep up with the exponentially increasing compute demand? How is it going to keep up from an architecture perspective, from a design perspective, also to meet the sustainability goals that we are looking at today? So there is this, let's say, interplay of technologies that need to happen. There is a lot of complementarity of technologies that people need to start acting upon, right? You see, for example, end of last year, I guess there was this debate of, and this was coming from, I guess, the CEO of DeepMind, where there was this debate of, is AI better than quantum? Should we invest less in quantum because AI can solve a lot of complex problems today? But I guess there we need to look at technologies more from a complementary perspective. How are they going to serve each other, and then how they are going to converge into something that will be the big power of tomorrow.
Absolutely. And research is also at the heart of all of these innovations that we are discussing. How do you ensure that TII's work not only advances technology, but also generates value and commercial opportunities for this region and internationally?
I go back to maybe what I mentioned before on how do we work or how do we define our roadmaps, right? And if I am to summarize it today, one is, are we working on something that will move the needle for the UAE that is critical to develop in an independent and sovereign manner for the country? The second one is working on a strategic global, I wouldn't say trend, but a global topic that will move the needle for the entire humanity, for the entire business, and for the entire government operations. And then third, it has to do with our mandate, and this is exactly what you mentioned, is are we working on something that will allow us to execute against our mandate, which is to contribute to the knowledge economy of the country, to create this entire ecosystem of moving R&D into startups, into licensing, and also to contribute to the diversification of the economy and GDP, which goes back to the knowledge economy.
And the technologies that you're working on, how do you move them from the lab into the real world? Could you give us an example?
Sure. As I mentioned, we don't do research for the sake of research. Of course, as we're working on all these technologies, we have a big amount of publications and patents that we have. Today, we have more than 1,500 publications. And in terms of classification of our publications, we are in the top tier on them being focused on top tier conferences and journals with high impact factors. So we do contribute to knowledge, we do contribute to research, whether it is foundational, fundamental, or applied research. And we make sure that it is propagated to the global community across the different sectors that we work with. And also we have a rich database of patents, of course, taking into consideration our age as a young institution. However, as we're doing all of this, our technology, for the most part, is seeing the light of the day, and it is being deployed in the country and outside the country, right? And this is our focus on being applied, working very closely with clients in the UAE and internationally to make sure we capture requirements of clients, we capture operational requirements, we capture real concepts of operations, so that we reach the point where we say, yes, it's a valuable technology, it will help me solve 1, 2, and 3, and then I will adopt it. So as examples, I will give you one example, and actually it's a topic that's very dear to my heart. You've seen the announcement of Nabat AI end of last year. I think it was in December 2024, which is a startup that was launched by Venture One to basically accelerate ecosystem restoration of mangroves and other plants or species in the UAE, and eventually it will have an international mandate. The core technology of what is being used in Nabat is a technology that has been developed by the Autonomous Robotics Research Center in TII, which has to do with the development of aerial drone technologies that, the entire robotic stack or the brain of those drones and the swarm of drones has been developed by the institute. All the command and control and the let's say the backend that allows you to do the operations in an autonomous fashion has been developed by the institute. And once we had this use case of agriculture and ecosystem restoration, we adapted it to the agriculture, and then we moved it to Nabat AI, which is now taking the operations forward. And what it meant is taking the stack, adapting it to the use case, developing a release mechanism which allows you to do aerial seeding, developing the platform or the infrastructure and the software or the solution that allows you to do the mapping in order to identify which are the regions that are fit for mangrove plantation, and then also developing the technology that allows you to monitor them later on. So you see, from something that has been developed in the lab, a prototype that has been deployed in many other use cases, this use case was possible in a very short period of time, and now we have under ATRC a successful startup that is doing that. There are many examples. I mean, I wanted to mention this because it has a different flavor. Since the topic is about flavors today, it has a different flavor, which is this technology is also useful for agriculture, for precision agriculture, for achieving the sustainability goals and the goal that was set by the country of achieving 100 million mangrove by 2030. So this is an example that I can give you on.
Congratulations on contributing positively to the UAE's sustainability goals. And Faisal, what should shareholders, be they public or private or universities, researchers, what should they look to implement to really fuel R&D and to achieve tangible outcomes?
I think it all starts from having a challenge and having a real business or real world problem. Often you see a lot of researchers, innovators, or some of those stakeholders starting with an idea just for the sake of building on that idea because they're passionate about it. To bring the idea or the concept of lab to market that you spoke about from before, you need to start from an existential problem that's already happening in the market, right? And I think we call that demand-driven innovation. Once you've looked into the market, you've seen that there's a demand, there's a problem that you need to solve, then you can take that challenge and build back from it. We often advocate the fact of moonshot or mission-driven innovations. What that means is you look for an existential challenge, climate sustainability could be one of them, and you build your mission or moonshot around this, right? And then you work backwards and say, what technologies that exist today or what technologies I need to build on to be able to address these challenges. And often that creates a more strong linkage from the lab to the market. And obviously throughout the way, you'd need to do a lot of testing, validation, testing in real world environments, especially in specific technologies such as drones or autonomous vehicles or any other technology. You'd want to have the testing fields, the testing labs, the testing facilities to be able to test, implement, and iterate on those technologies as you bring them to the market. And I think the colleagues in TII and in Venture One are creating a lot of these environments in which you can start with applied research and then figure out ways to test it to the market.
I want to ask you about the role that the Middle East can play in setting the standard for emerging technologies and digitally aligned economic activity. What haven't we considered in our conversation today?
I think the Middle East has a very specific dynamic that's going on, and I would highlight a few things. Historically, the Middle East has been more an adopter of technology rather than a creator of technology. I wouldn't say historically, but over the past decade or two, for example, especially during that revolution. But as we move into that transformation that we're speaking about, there's certain aspects that the region holds in which that can shape this journey for economic transformation using emerging technologies. I'd highlight, for example, the industries at scale that the Middle East has. If we speak about healthcare, oil and gas, logistics, those are significant economic activity that are happening at scale and relatively concentrated with quick decision making and quick access to leadership. So this is usually a very important factor in driving those, whether it's in data sets or whether it's in being able to create those sandboxes that you spoke about, right? So for example, sandbox in logistics is not something easily done in other countries or in Europe, for example, compared to the Middle East, right? Whereas the regulatory sandbox that you can create here is much faster, right? I would say the other part is also there is a strong capital that's being deployed both locally and globally, and in that fact, primarily focusing on emerging technologies, but also how can you use that capital to shape the industries that you're doing, right? And I think both the political will that you mentioned earlier, the industries at scale, but also the policy and regulatory sandboxes and the experimentation coupled with that capital that you can deploy are ways in which the region can shape a lot of this industry for emerging technologies going forward.
Najwa, we are coming to the close of our podcast. Unfortunately, we don't have much time with you left, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you for advice for the next generation of young women from this region who are interested in pursuing careers in STEM. You have had a remarkably successful career in both science and research. So what would be your advice to them?
Maybe if I may summarize the advice in three things. The first one is to have courage and be bold. Things will not always work from the first time, but us as women, we're like everybody else. We can excel in math, we can excel in physics. Genetically, we're as disposed as men in order to do very well in this, right? The problem with women in general, and I'm taking it as a reflection of myself, sometimes we feel that because we're women, we have to lead, we have to go to perfection from the first trial. And this is not true. We have to be bold, we have to have courage, we have to be perseverant. We can be as good, and sometimes we bring different perspective that maybe can move things in a different way and in a better way. This is the first one. The second one is surround yourself with women and men that can provide you this support system. We need a support system. We cannot do it by ourselves. And I would say I was very lucky during my career, especially here in the UAE, to have the support system, to have the respect that encouraged me to go more and more and not to give up. Because it's human to feel that, no, I'm going to give up. No, this is not right. And by having the support system, again, I emphasize from both women and men, will make a very big difference in in our career and in our STEM ambitions. And the last one, and this is something that applies to myself, is to have empathy and not to try to prove myself by being aggressive or by being, in no force all the time. No, I try to have empathy. And this way you can have a team that functions better, that appreciates what you're doing better, that comes to work every day and they love the job. And this is a very big sentiment of satisfaction that also will keep you going in what you're doing.
Wonderful advice. Have empathy, have a great support system, and try not to be a perfectionist, at least at the very beginning of your career. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Faisal, for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.